Hey, Archie, does it ever make sense to completely de-risk your investment portfolio?
Well, Rob, probably not, but let's talk about why.
Weekly wisdom to help you retire and stay that way. This is Last Paycheck.
Welcome back to the Last Paycheck podcast, brought to you by Hoxton Planning and Management. We're your hosts, CFP professionals Archie Hoxton and Rob Hoxton. And today, we're going to be talking about a really popular topic in our practice right now, and that is the risk of not taking risk. So essentially, a lot of folks want to get out of the markets and not take any risk, but unfortunately, by doing that, you are taking on a different kind of risk. So we're going to go into that today.
Hey, Archie, we have a really great tool. It's free on our website at www.hoxtonpm.com. It's called the Investment Alignment Worksheet. And if you go to the website and at the top, you click on the tab for resources, it drops down, you choose worksheets, and then go to the Investment Alignment Worksheet. This is a tool that'd be super helpful for you as you kind of process what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. We can also put a link in the description directly to the worksheet too.
So you can click right to it.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is a really popular topic right now. I mean, right now, there's a lot of concern on the news and in the among investors about geopolitical events. And this is as we go through cycles of higher political tension and rumors of potential wars and things like that, people tend to get a little bit antsy about being in the stock market.
Yeah, naturally. I mean, it kind of gives everybody a little bit of pause for sure.
Yeah. And if you're retired, it probably is extra poignant because this investment portfolio probably represents a significant source of income for you for the rest of your life. If you're younger and you're working, maybe you're not even worried about it at all because you're just chunking money away in your 401k and you're like, I've got plenty of time to figure this one out. But for retirees, this can be a serious concern.
Yeah, I mean, it is scary. As somebody who's certainly closer to retirement age than you are, Archie, the idea of retiring and then watching, in the relative short term, watching my retirement portfolio drop by 20-25%, that would be really uncomfortable. In fact, it would be so uncomfortable that it might be tempting to make maybe some hasty changes to the portfolio just to stop the bleeding.
Yeah.
Now, what's important to remember is that when you get that kind of downside volatility in the stock market or in the bond market, those developments, they have always been temporary. Now, there are certain types of investments, when it goes down, they aren't necessarily temporary.
Right.
But what we're talking about is sort of your tried and true, cornerstone of most people's retirement plan. And those are stocks and bonds and mutual funds and exchange-traded funds in traditional assets. So, and frankly, the temptation is to de-risk your portfolio when you really shouldn't.
Right. Yeah, there's an old saying, more money has been lost waiting for the bear market than in bear markets. So, because, you have to time it perfectly. And, as if you've done some research, you'll know that nobody really times it perfectly outside of having some luck.
Well, yeah, and you have to time it twice, right? You have to time when to get out and you have to time when to get in. And it's easier to get out than it is to get in. So if you've ever been in a bear market and you sold out and put money on the sidelines, getting back in it requires a tremendous amount of courage. If you have just ridden it through, when you start to see the market move higher, you feel great about it. But when you're out of the market and you think maybe it's bottom and it starts to move up, there's always this. It's kind of like the receiver playing football that is trying to catch the ball and he hears sort of in his head, he hears footsteps. He doesn't see the defender coming, but he hears the footsteps. And it's the same thing with investing. If you're out of the market and you need to get back in, you always hear the footsteps of the next leg down in the market.
Right.
So hard.
So timing is basically, it's a game of luck. You're taking your life savings and you're gambling with it to jump in and out of the market like that. Now, if let's say the market's relatively stable and you're hearing things in the geopolitical world, as many people are now, we're not in a correction or a bear market right now at the time of recording this episode. So it can be tempting to say, well, maybe I'll just go now. I'll get out now and I'll just miss it because I'm worried or I'm convinced that this is going to happen because of, news that I've been reading. And so let's say you do that. And I think it's tempting to view it as, okay, I was taking risk and now I'm not. But that's actually not how it works. So if let's say you have a diversified portfolio, 60% in the stock market, 40% in the bond market, maybe you're taking sort of a mid-tier level of risk, that a typical retiree level of risk. So you've just gone from taking some risk, and it's tempting to think that now if you go completely to cash, that you're taking no risk. But that's just not true. You're just taking a different kind of risk. And I would argue, in many ways, it's a more dangerous kind of risk because you can't see it or feel it. You pull up your phone, you're like, yep, no fluctuation for me, no but volatility for me.
It's kind of like the carbon monoxide of investing, right?
Right.
It's this odorless, deadly gas
right.
that gets you.
Right. And it's probably, I'd say, three things. One, you're completely exposed to inflation. If this is in an account that's not bearing any interest, every year, on average, you'll lose 2.5% of your portfolio value in purchasing power. Your account might remain the same if you don't spend any of the money, but what you can buy with that full bucket of money just got smaller. So, and that's going to happen every year. It always has. Things have always gotten more expensive over time. Inflation is a reality that's always with us. And that you might not feel it, 1 year to the next. Unless we have a year like 2022, then everybody felt it. But most years, you don't really feel it. It's very quiet and subtle. Over 10, 15, or 20 years, though, the cumulative effect of inflation would be massive. And you'd find, wow, I don't think I have enough.
Yeah, over this 30-year period of time, I've lost 30% of my purchasing power. If I had simply stayed invested, I'd have more purchasing power, most likely. Yeah.
Right. So that's the first one. That is a silent killer. It is a real risk and that you are taking if you're getting out of the market, that you're not taking as much of or in the same way if you are invested. Not to say that inflation risk isn't real if you're investing, but you're just taking a giant dose of it if you're not.
What's the second kind? What's the second, sort of not so obvious risk here?
It's the longevity risk.
Oh, living a long time.
Living a long time. Yeah. If you are, especially if you live longer than you expect to. I mean, most of us don't have an idea, I guess, of how long we're going to live. I guess we don't really think about that very often. But when it comes to your money, you can't just take a pot of money. Let's say you have a pile of money that you're sitting on. And if I'm 60 right now and I think I'm going to live to 85, I'm going to divide that by 15 and I'm all set. That just isn't going to work.
Yeah.
One, because
we don't come with an expiration date, right?
We don't come with an expiration date. Plus, you add in inflation, it's going to happen a lot faster than 85.
Yeah, we always talk about this when we're doing financial planning. Clients, when they ask us why we use an age 95, typically life expectancy for a couple, they're like, what? We're not going to live to 95. And I'm like, well, you don't really know that. Number one, if you look at the mortality tables for a married couple that's alive at 85, there's a really good chance that one of you is going to be alive 10 years from now.
Yeah.
Right. And we always tell people we don't want to be the ones that have to make that call that says this distribution this month is your last one because you live too long.
Right. And so that's how we deal with longevity risk is through the planning process mostly.
Right.
And also through taking the right amount of investment risk. Not too much and not too little. The planning process through, assuming that we're going to live longer than we think, just in case we live longer than we think, that helps to mitigate that risk. But if you're not investing, that you get 1 year like 2022 in there, and it just wipes you out 5 years early from your estimate. And then if you live 5 years longer than your estimate, you've got 10 years of living without a portfolio.
Right.
Just on Social Security.
Archie, the third one is opportunity cost. Touch on that. I think this is a really important one because essentially, if you miss out on $1 of return this year, it's not just a cost that is $1. It's
Right.
the compounded value of that missed dollar, right?
Yeah. So, and it happens every year. So if you get out now, and let's say if you had stayed invested, just for round numbers sake, let's say you would have earned $10,000, right? That $10,000 in 10 years, that's $20,000 that you didn't have. In 20 years, maybe it's $40,000 that you don't have. If you look at that, if you look at larger numbers, like if you have $1 million portfolio, that could be 100,000, 10 years later, 200,000, 10 years later, 400,000. So, just using the rule of 72, that's a huge opportunity cost. Yeah. And that 30 years later might be a time when you might really, really need an extra 400,000 for long-term care costs. Right? So the cost of not investing is so great, especially when you consider the weight of the historical returns of the markets and the long-term benefits that it's easy to lose sight of when you have short-term volatility.
Archie, what are some sort of mind tricks? I think of Jedis when I think of this. What are some of the mind tricks that you can do to help you avoid making this mistake of de-risking too much in your investment strategy?
Yeah, I think one of them is just looking at your money as in buckets. I think that can be a useful strategy for people. Sometimes it even helps to have separate accounts for each bucket.
Like buckets of money, like buckets of gold coins?
Well, it's a metaphor.
Yeah.
You have a long-term bucket, and that's your stocks.
Yeah, all right.
You have an intermediate-term bucket, and that's your bonds, and a short-term bucket, and that's your cash. So if you look at, say I have $30,000 of cash. That's my emergency savings. That's my need-it-right-now fund. I've got bonds, right, and that's in the next 5 years, I need this. And if we have a bear market and a really bad market, it doesn't really matter that much because I've got 5 years worth of money sitting in bonds, just earning interest.
So you can afford to allow the long-term money to recover.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, you don't need to be so concerned about what happens this month or next month yeah, okay.
This is helpful for people who I often hear this objection talking about taking risk in retirement, even if it's a very moderate level of risk, maybe half the portfolio is in bonds and half of it's in stock. I often hear the objection, well, I don't have enough time for that to recover. And it's like, well, bear markets, are generally fairly short-lived in the grand scheme. And if you know that if you have a good handle on your living expense, you know how long your cash is going to last. You know how long the bonds are going to last. If you have, depending on if your spending needs are properly proportioned to the size of your portfolio, then you should have no problem outlasting any bear market in stocks.
Central to that message that you just said, Archie, is not investing in a vacuum. You should be investing within the construct of a greater financial plan.
Right.
Right. And so knowing the timing of your financial needs and understanding whether or not you can weather the ups and downs of the market. I mean, in our practice, we measure the risk of the portfolio. We compare that to the risk tolerance of the client, and we look at it in terms of what's the range of potential outcomes in any 6-month period of time. So how negative is a particular portfolio likely to perform in a 6-month stretch, or how positive? And then we help the client sort of try that on for size. Right? So it's like putting on a pair of shoes before you buy them.
Right.
So they understand, what the range of potential results is. And then we match that against their financial plan to make sure that whatever it is they end up with will actually allow them to meet their long-term goals.
Yeah. And I think this is so important because knowing how much risk you're taking and knowing that the worst outcomes are accounted for through the financial planning process and that your withdrawals are sustainable, based, and informed by lots of different testing and possible scenarios, then you sort of are free to say, okay, I know that my initial feeling is I don't have enough time. You're actually free to look at this from the perspective of I actually do have time, and time is one of the problems that I have. I have a lot of time, and so I need this money to last. This is why I can't take too little risk. It's also why I can't take too much risk. So finding that balance, and it's probably, a pretty moderate balance if you're retired, can be made so much simpler through maybe having a bucket mindset about your money, definitely knowing possible ranges of returns, good and bad, and making sure that your withdrawals are sustainable across these different possibilities through a good financial plan.
Yeah. Check out the investment alignment worksheet, which is the free worksheet that we have posted to the hoxtonpm.com website. This is a great tool to help you understand whether what you're doing in your investment life is well matched to what you're hoping to accomplish in your financial plan long term.
Right.
It's a great tool, no cost, no obligation. Just check it out.
Yeah. Well, that's about all we have time for today. So if you like the episode, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We'd love to have more subscribers and be able to deliver you all content more frequently. Hit the bell for notifications so you know when we put out new videos. Share it with your family and friends. And if you have an idea for an episode that you'd like to see, leave us a comment. All right, we'll look forward to seeing you next time.
You've been watching Last Paycheck, weekly wisdom to help you retire and stay that way. If you like this show, be sure to hit like and subscribe. Last Paycheck is available anywhere you get your podcasts.